The fires were still smoldering when Joe Labelle arrived, but the village was completely empty. Imagine the silence of the Canadian Arctic in November. It is not just quiet, it is a physical weight that presses against your eardrums. Joe Labelle was a seasoned trapper, a man who knew the rhythm of the frozen north like the back of his hand. He had arrived at the Inuit village on the shores of Anjikuni Lake in 1954, expecting the usual hospitality. Instead, he found an impossible tableau of life interrupted. The pots were still hanging over the hearths, the food was half-cooked, and the drying racks were still laden with fish. But there was not a soul to be found. The village was supposed to be bustling with hundreds of inhabitants. Thousands, if you believe the local lore that persisted in the region for decades. Where do 2,500 people go when the temperature is 40 degrees below zero? They wouldn't have left without their rifles. They wouldn't have left without their clothing. Yet, every single sled dog was found dead, starved to death despite the nearby food supplies, their frozen carcasses slumped in the snow. This is the central mystery that has haunted Canadian folklore for 70 years. Was it a mass migration? A sudden, inexplicable evacuation? Or were we looking at the aftermath of something that defies the laws of physics entirely? The investigation that followed was a masterclass in bureaucratic obfuscation and localized terror. When the Royal Canadian Mounted Police finally reached the site, they found evidence of a struggle that didn't happen, and tracks that led nowhere. There were no footprints in the deep, unyielding snow that had fallen the night before. It was as if the entire population had simply dissolved into the gray, swirling mist of the Arctic twilight. The logs of the RCMP officers who were first on the scene are filled with contradictions. Some reports claim they found a graveyard where the graves had been dug up and emptied, the bodies missing. Others claim the village was simply abandoned, left in a state of sudden, unexplained haste. But why would an entire culture, an entire lineage, leave behind the tools of their survival? There was a report from a nearby pilot named Armand Laurent who claimed to have seen a strange, pulsating light over the lake that same evening. He described it as a cylinder of fire, moving against the wind, descending toward the village before vanishing in a flash of blinding white. When he flew over the area shortly after, he saw nothing but the desolate, flat tundra. The government, of course, suppressed the reports. They labeled it a mass relocation and moved on, but the survivors of the region, the few who had been out hunting when the event occurred, spoke of the light that steals souls. As we dig deeper into the files, we find records of other strange occurrences in that specific latitude. Electromagnetic anomalies, radio blackouts that lasted for weeks, and sightings of figures that were too tall to be human. Is it possible that the Anjikuni Lake mystery is not just a disappearance, but a glimpse into a phenomenon we aren't meant to understand? The deeper you look into the archives, the more you realize that the files were scrubbed, not just edited, but erased. Whole sections of the 1954 police logs are missing, replaced by innocuous notes about weather conditions. But the weather wasn't the cause. The weather didn't kill the dogs. Something else was present at the lake that night, something that left the village in a state of suspended animation. The needles on the compasses were spinning wildly. The aurora borealis that night was unusually bright, shimmering in colors that no Inuit elder had ever recorded in their oral history. It wasn't just a northern light, it was a radiation event that modern instruments could barely map. We have to ask ourselves, if 2,500 people can disappear in a single night, leaving nothing but half-eaten meals and dead dogs, what does that imply for our safety in the wilderness? The investigation into the site was halted after only 3 days. Why? Perhaps because they found something they couldn't explain to the public. Perhaps because they knew that whatever took those people was still lurking in the shadows of the permafrost, waiting for the next group of travelers to stumble upon their forgotten domain. We are left with the cold reality of the Arctic, a place where history is buried under miles of ice, and where the truth is often far more chilling than the wind. as the investigation leads us toward the realization that the official explanation was nothing more than a fabricated shield to protect a terrifying secret, we must acknowledge the possibility that this wasn't an isolated event. This was a systematic removal, a harvest of humanity that left behind only the hollow shells of a life they no longer needed. The records show that the families who were eventually tasked with reclaiming the land refused to go, claiming the spirits of the dead were still trapped in the frozen air, waiting for the return of the ones who were taken in the dark, and that is why